experiencing the scene in bursts, like static from a TV with a loose antenna. I can see the picture, but the resolution is off. I can only intuit that something is different, and I'm powerless to change the channel. I see Montoya raise her hand quicker than I've ever seen her move, and felt the force of her backhand mashing my lips against my teeth before I've even registered what she'd done. Though I'm driving, I see us look at each other in horror and surprise, our expressions reflections of one another. Oh my God, you hit me. Oh my God, I hit you. Again, graceful. Bear with me, please. We're locked in the truth of our relationship now, and with the eyes of my soul, I see us both acknowledge that change is on the horizon. We cannot continue on from here. I can no longer be the abused. I can no longer be the enabler. Miss Carla, I'm sorry. She said to me from what feels like a distance, a great distance. Her features, warped by the tears I cannot stop, seem contrite. I know we have to be someplace, but a feeling hot and prickly up and down the surface of my skin urges me to pull over. I'm too stunned to drive any further. I still haven't spoken as I'm not quite sure what to say. I don't know whether to fight or flee, but I feel strongly that I need to leave the car. The car isn't safe. I'm not safe. I'm not safe. This is the first time I really let the thought sink into my brain. Every day I'm with these people, I'm putting myself and my child in danger. I'm not safe. I can't help the tears that find their way down my cheeks, the anger, humiliation, and fear associated with being slapped like a child in front of my son digs into my soul with heat and with shame. No wonder he didn't respect me. Through my passivity, I taught him that love and compassion were weaknesses, easily slapped down by the person with the loudest voice. He didn't see nothing, Miss Carla. Montoya insisted as I unsnapped my seatbelt, fumbled with the car handle, needing to get out of the car. He didn't see, he don't know. She repeated, chirping like a bird at dawn. I could hear the fear in her voice. A woman that lived to push boundaries and bully others to get her way understood that she'd overstepped. With each passing minute, her hold on me was slipping. And though I'm sure it wasn't her intention, that slap woke me up. I stepped out of the car, the driver's side door shut firmly behind me, and I dropped to my knees. I didn't know what else to do. I had done everything, had tried everything, and I was lost. Please. I prayed silently, tears running down my bruised cheeks and swollen lip. Please. Lord, help, please. And there in a parking lot of a store I can't remember, I gave up. So I'm going to pause, and you're probably thinking, what is this? So let me provide the context to you. When I left Indiana, after graduating from Indiana University, I moved to DC, had what you would imagine would be a pretty normal life. I got married, and my husband and I had some infertility issues. After going through multiple infertility treatments, I miscarried, and our marriage basically didn't survive. I decided after our divorce, and we were living in Charlotte, North Carolina at the time, which is where I live now, to become a foster parent based on the encouragement of one of my friends. And I got a couple of calls about taking on a number of children, multiples, and I thought, not the first try. Let me, try one and see what I can do. And I also knew that, I know myself, I'm a person that gets attached. So I got a call about a premature baby boy. And I thought, okay, my niece and nephew were preemies, but I don't know if I can do this. And the social worker said, okay, what do you want to do? And I said, how much time do I have? And she said, now. So I said, okay. I stopped at Target, and I got a car seat and some preemie clothes, and I'm off to the hospital, and I saw this baby boy, and he was about 5 pounds, and he was absolutely amazing, and I fell in love immediately. I brought him home. My mom came from Kokomo, my sister came from DC, and for the next 6 months I was in heaven. I was sleepy, but I was in heaven. And aside from the visits with the birth parents, we lived a pretty normal life. The visits with the birth parents, that was something that I had never experienced before. I learned a lot about them during that time, and I have to say it opened up a world to me that I knew nothing about. I learned about what I will now call generational trauma. I learned about growing up in a situation where a child has to protect him or herself from their parents. So my son's birth mother, she grew up in a situation where there was a lot of violence, there were a lot of drugs, and she lived her life in survival mode. And so while I felt and cared for her a lot, my focus was on this baby, who I had grown to love. I can't even say grown to love, I loved him from the moment I saw him. So at 6 months, there was a regular standard court date, no big deal. Social services said, don't worry about it, you don't need to come, it's a regular date. I got a call that afternoon and said, he's going to his mother. And I said, you're kidding me. She's not prepared to take care of him. She can't take care of him. Not that I didn't care about her, but I knew that she could not take care of him. So I packed up about 5 bags of items to help care for him, and they came and picked him up, and I was devastated. My manager at the time, who was also a friend, he said, take as much time as you need. And I lasted a week, maybe 2, and I called her. Against social services recommendations, I didn't care. I could not sleep because I knew this child was in jeopardy. Whoever's here from social services, I'm sorry, that's what I did. I did it anyway. So she answered the phone, and she agreed that I could see him. And for the next 6 years, we tried to co-parent. It was a tumultuous 6 years. It was a very rocky 6 years. There were some awesome moments, like the time that she said, she went from, he'll never be anything different than us. He's just like us. He has our blood running through his veins. He'll never be better than us, to saying, we were filling out an application, a school application for a pre-K program, and she said, is it okay for me to say I want him to do better? And I said, that's what every parent wants. And she had never heard that before. She had never heard it takes a village. She had only heard, you'll never be anybody, you'll never be anything. And then, so I would think often back to my childhood and think, man, all these things I took for granted. Like, I had a solid foundation. Who would I be and where would I be if I didn't have that? It was so humbling. So as time went on, my son went from this loving child to a very angry child as he got older. And I really didn't understand it. But I sought counsel from my EAP counselor, if you all have those at work, like your employee assistance program. I talked to child advocacy groups. I talked to friends. I was like, what can I do about this? Because I knew he was in dangerous situations. I wanted to help his parents. I kind of went by instinct on what to do, but what I was doing probably wasn't the right thing. I did things like, well, let me say this. they were living in places that didn't have electricity, for example. And they would steal electricity, and I didn't even know you could do that. I didn't know you could steal electricity. And it was because you live your life in survival mode. I didn't have to do that. So it's like, it's humbling to say, her perspective was, I'm doing what I have to do. But I didn't have to do that. So I didn't know about it. So they lived at one point in this motel, and it just, I couldn't sleep at night thinking about him being in this motel. I'd see all these little kids running around, but I knew it was like drug infested, and it just hurt my heart. So at one point they were in a house, and the house was so bad. There were so many mice in the house that a snake showed up. And I remember buying them, like, so here I am, Miss Fix It, you know. I have control, I can fix everything, is what I'm thinking, right? Not that I think I'm all that, it's just that I think I can fix things, right? I can help people, that's what I do. So I bought mattresses and mattress pads, and they would use the mattress pad once and throw it away. And then they'd sleep on the dirty mattress, and I didn't understand it. So I said, okay, now I'm really going to fix it. I bought a house. I put them in the house. I bought cleaning supplies. I bought food. I did all these things. Guess what happened to the house? It looked like a crack house, a combination between a crack house and a hoarder's house, because they didn't have the tools. They didn't have the essentials. They didn't have the foundation to know what to do with that house. When we talked about what to put in the linen closet versus the pantry, she didn't know. And I'm not saying this, I'm not trying to make fun of anybody. What I'm saying is, there are so many things I'm not going to say you, I took for granted, that people just know that they don't know. So let me fast forward. We started seeing a lot of changes in my son's behavior. His mom has a mental health condition that was exacerbated by drug abuse, which I would say drug abuse was a symptom. There was a lot of domestic violence in the home. My son, as he got older, started getting violent. He started hitting people at school. He started hitting me. He was very angry. When he was 5, he threatened suicide at school. That was a few months after his mother hit me. He started saying things like, you know, you better get back or I'm going to hit you like my mama did. I didn't know what to do with that. Again, I'm consulting with people, and one therapist said, you know, Carla, you're not being fair to him because you're exposing him to a world that he'll never be a part of. And I said, no, I'm not accepting that. That's unacceptable. Every child has the right to be safe. Every child has the right to be a productive member of this world. I'm not accepting it. So at age 6, my son attempted suicide twice. He was 6. And I thought, you know, now I hear things about stigma. We were just talking about stigma. I didn't care about stigma. I wanted my son to live. So I'm going to tell you, and I'm probably going on and on, but I want to tell you about 3 days that kind of changed everything. So I already told you about when his mother hit me. And I thought if she would hit me, what was she doing to him when I didn't have him? It didn't mean I didn't love her, didn't have compassion for her, or his father, because I knew enough about where they came from. I was learning about trauma, generational trauma, and about mental health. I can tell you I was living my life in hypervigilance mode, and my mental health was suffering. I was struggling to make it through each day. Every day there was a crisis. And it's like, but on the outside I just look normal. You know, mental health doesn't have a look, right? People are like, I would have never known you were going through all that. Nope, and you never would, because I present well. A lot of people present well. So, my son was in behavioral health. This is in Charlotte, North Carolina. My family was really struggling with the way I was handling the situation, as you can imagine. They didn't know half of what was going on, not even a third, probably not a quarter. And I was talking to a family member about, their suggestion was that I tried to get the mother committed, involuntarily committed, because she really was struggling and she had suicidal ideation, but just in my soul I knew that wasn't the right thing. So I remembered when I saw an estate planning attorney, she had given me the names of 3 family law attorneys. It was buried somewhere in some paperwork, and the 3rd attorney I called, we talked. That was day 1. That same day, it was October 24th, 2016, that same day, my son's birth father went to the therapist I had connected him with and terminated their services. Day 2, I went to the attorney's office. He said, do you have any evidence? I had piles of evidence of my role in his life as a parent. This is day 2. Day 2, the father went and withdrew my son from the Christian school I had enrolled him in. Meanwhile, my son is at behavioral health, okay? Day 3, we went to court. I got emergency custody and restraining orders. There have been threats against my life and his from his birth parents. Day 3, that same day, the birth father went up to behavioral health to take his son out of behavioral health. He could not get on the floor. Now, if it sounds to you like I'm villainizing his father, I am not. The whole point was to keep my son safe. He was not safe with his parents. His parents are not in a good place. They're still not in a good place mentally. And what I would say is they were victims as children. Oftentimes, people who suffer from generational trauma end up continuing the cycle. But to this day, we pray for them. We know that they are not healthy, and we still pray for them together. So I got temporary custody, emergency custody, temporary custody, permanent custody, and on October 2018, the adoption was finalized. It took 8 years, but I would not give up on my son. And he is now at Carlisle, that's my last name. And I am back to Carlisle. And we are an awesome family. We've added 2 young men to our family who were in need. And they're both 18, but they're rising juniors. They play rugby. They're wonderful young men. My son was diagnosed with PTSD. Rarely do I say his real name, but in the video you'll see in a few minutes, he's actually in the video, and I did that because it's an educational video about mental health. It's about his diagnosis of PTSD, and it features 2 other stories as well. He has several diagnoses, and I will share with you from this experience. I also was diagnosed with situational depression and anxiety. How could I not be? But it was something, in some ways you could say I chose. I would say that was my baby. I had no choice. I took steps maybe somebody else wouldn't, but it's like a mother's love. That's what it is. And I'm not saying it's right, wrong, or indifferent, but that's what it was. We talked a little bit about stigma, and this is what I would say. When someone is threatening suicide, as far as I'm concerned, stigma goes out the window. It's about saving a life. We have this training, and I'm hoping you all have this here in Marion as well, in this county, QPR, question, persuade, and refer. I'm not sure if you have that here, but if you do have it here, I think it's like a 90-minute training, and it's so worthwhile because mentioning suicide to somebody who has suicidal ideation isn't going to make them consider suicide or dying by suicide. Talking them through and getting training to help them consider an alternative, because what they really want to stop is the pain. That's what I learned from my son's birth mother. It's about the pain. It's numbing the pain. It's stopping the pain. So what I will say to you now is my son, who is 9 years old, with several diagnoses, is an awesome rising fourth grader who plays tackle football, who's on the AB honor roll, but he just learned how to tie his shoes because trauma impacts the brain. He had stunted growth in terms of his fine and gross motor skills. He's doing occupational therapy, he does music therapy, but if you met him today, you would say, oh, he opened the door for me. He said, he'll say, let me pull your chair out. But a couple of weeks ago, I had to restrain him. It was the first time in several months. Sometimes he's triggered. I know how to de-escalate. I do volunteer with law enforcement and first responders on the crisis intervention team. I think you all will probably be hearing about that a little bit. In Charlotte, in Mecklenburg County, we have a crisis intervention team where law enforcement, first responders, they learn how to de-escalate situations where a person is in a mental health crisis or is going through some type of drug crisis. And it's one of the most rewarding things that I could do. We do role play, sit on a panel and talk about our experience. I had to call CIT twice with my son, who at the time was 6 years old and 170 pounds. He's not 170 now, he's about 140, he's a big boy. Now he can tackle, but he doesn't tackle me anymore, I can tell you that. But he's just an awesome kid, and I want to share with you the last time I went to speak before CIT and work with them, he wanted to come and speak. By the way, he wants his name on my book, Journey to the Sun. He wants credit, but he's not going to get credit yet. He can do his own book when he's ready. And this is what he wanted me to tell the law enforcement officers. He wrote it out for me to speak, but I remember it, so I'll share it with you. He said, I've gone through a lot. I've gone through murdering threats, but I have my brothers and my mom now, and we play outside together, and I feel safe. And so when we talk about stigma, when I hear my son say, I feel safe, and he shows he feels safe by his behavior, to me, that's the goal. Telling your story, sharing your story, that helps break the stigma. And so while my family doesn't totally understand, I won't stop telling my story. I might not tell it as long as I do today, but telling the story is important because that helps break the stigma. I don't have it all right, and I don't have all the answers, and I'm still learning. I may not say the right words all the time, but it's important to share the stories because that helps make it real and helps people understand they're not alone. And I will tell you, I felt very isolated through my process. I lost some friends, but I learned about, this age group of 10 to 34 that, suicide is the number 2, the second leading cause of death for those ages 10 to 34. We have to talk about it. We have to talk about it because these are our young adults. We can't just brush it under the rug. So let me end on a high note and say, I so appreciate your time. You have no idea how much it means to me to come home to Indiana, to be able to share my journey, the journey of my son and me, and my journey to motherhood, which is something that all the degrees in the world didn't prepare me for it. But I'm so thankful to be a mom, and a mom to this son, who is just an awesome young man. So thank you for your time, and I appreciate you. Thank you.
Carla's going to walk us through the ACE. as Brittany comes up and gets her computer set up.
Okay, so I would ask everyone if you could just take a moment and complete that ACE questionnaire. Let me know if you don't have a pen at your table. So I'll go ahead and get started. So the Adverse Childhood Experiences study started off as a study on obesity, and it was done by the CDC and Kaiser Permanente many years ago, and I just want to share a little something with you. It's just perspective. The ACE study and subsequent research shows that people with an ACE score of 4 are twice as likely to be smokers and 7 times more likely to be alcoholic than someone of an ACE score of 0. Having an ACE score of 4 increases the risk of emphysema and chronic bronchitis by nearly 400%, and I'm going to say it differently because they used to say attempted suicide, but now we say trying to die by suicide by 1,200%. An ACE score of 6 or higher is associated with a 20-year shorter lifespan than someone with an ACE score of 0. However, and this is where this ties back to my son, what we talked about my son. Subsequent research has shown that social buffers, such as having just one caring adult in a child's life, can mitigate the impacts of ACEs. So I don't need to know your score, you know your own score. The point of the score is that it's just a score that you know, and it gives you perspective. And it's for you to know the score. It's nothing that there's no right, wrong, or indifferent answer. It's to know it, and then what you do with it from there. It's to talk to somebody about it, you know, to understand that we've all been through things. And sometimes there's more of an impact than what we even realize, you know, the things that we've been through. But I wanted to share that with you because my son's score was a 9, possibly a 10. We're not sure about one of them. But you saw in the video that he is resilient. He's resilient because he had someone who cares. And I believe in prayer with works. And so I just wanted to share that with you to kind of just tie it all together. And with that, I'm going to turn it over now to Brittany. Thank you. Anybody have any?
I'll ask a question. Paul, your son, does he have siblings? And if so, how were you able to navigate that?
So my son has 10 siblings. And the siblings were, his mother's rights were terminated to the 10 siblings. When I got him as a foster child, I was told that he should not have contact with any of his siblings. When he went back to his birth mother when he was 6 months old, he did get to know some of his siblings. But when I got custody of him, we ended that contact because unfortunately they had kind of moved into the cycle of generational trauma, and some of them are drug addicted and into prostitution and things like that, and it's very important, he's a young boy, that he stay safe. So unfortunately, we have no contact with any of his siblings at this point. I know there are some questions. I see some familiar faces. They came down from Indianapolis a little late. I know there are some questions. Questions?
While you were speaking, I heard you say, you threw stigma out the window. That goes out the window. And as I continue to listen to you, I thought about an issue I had a long time ago, but I was so young that I didn't know that I needed to go and talk to someone about it. When I did talk to that someone that I confided in the most, they didn't give me the answer that I thought I really needed. For people who are in that position, what would you say to them?
Thanks. That's a hard question, and it's an awesome question, and it's a tough question. So I mentioned that we have two young men that have become a part of our family, my two older sons, and one of them struggles with a mental health condition based on trauma as a young man. And I will say that he tried several times to reach out to other people and got shot down, I would say. He really didn't come to me. I think we just established a relationship and I identified it. So I think it's important as adults that we step up and ask questions. How are you doing? Like, it's okay not to be okay. You notice a change in a child, I think it's important as adults that we reach out. A child doesn't always know the right thing to say. I think some of it's for us to recognize, but also to give children a safe space to be able to communicate. I don't know that there's one answer, but I think it's about the more safe spaces that a child has, the better. And the more educated we become, the more we can provide those to children. If it's a teacher at school, if it's at a community center, if it's an adult in their lives who might listen. You know, I can tell you even now, there are so many people who approach me now, or even young adults who approach me now, that it's a blessing, but it's overwhelming. And I try to connect them to support or services. But the first thing I try to do is listen. You know, and sometimes that's really helpful. Even with the young man in my life that I mentioned, we were able to get him in therapy. And he goes faithfully, and he's not concerned about stigma because there are so many of his peers that have challenges now that do a lot of things. It's so common, it's almost the norm at this point. And unfortunately, at his school, we're in Charlotte, North Carolina. I don't know if you all heard about a young man at school who killed one of his peers. And it was supposedly over a bullying incident. I don't know exactly what happened, but you know, kids are really taking matters into their own hands and they don't necessarily have someone to talk to. So I think, you know, the more we have open dialogue and ask open-ended questions of our kids and have programs like this, the better. I think you mentioned a number of different resources available. Hopefully that includes resources for children as well. And I mean, it's a little hard for me to speak in this area since I'm not here, but what I can say is I know where I live, we do a lot in the community with kids. Like I have my young men involved in an organization called the Males Place, and I try to give them experiences. You know, they went to Ghana, they went to Cuba. I want them to be able to talk to other people who look like them, who may not look like them. I want them to have these experiences, and I want them to be able to talk to me. But they have to feel safe first to be able to do that. So I don't think there's one straight answer, but I think, you know, those things help. Look, I just took the mic over. What other, you know, that's how I do. What other questions do you have, if any?
What can you share about enabling?
Oh, it says the former queen of enabling. So I would say, I think we do a lot of things in the name of helping, that probably is more like enabling. And I would say that for those 6 years, when I was trying to help my son's parents, I was enabling them. But I didn't really know that. I thought I was helping, you know. It's that give a man a fish versus teach a man to fish. They didn't want to learn how to fish, but I was like, let me just show. So my therapist at the time, who I still see, said, you know, probably the best thing you can do is just be who you are. So I think, and we talked about this, probably the best I was going to get was, I just mentioned earlier, when his mother said, may I put on this application that I want him to do better and be better? That may be the best that you get, Carla, and I probably should have been satisfied with that. But no, I wanted to do more because I felt like they were deserving, and they are deserving. But I just had to realize I couldn't fix it all. And when I stopped trying to control everything and realized, oh, why are you laughing, Mother? I don't see my mother's laughing. So, but yes, no, when I had to realize that, you know, me trying to control everything and fix everything, it just wasn't working. And I saw that by my son's behavior. That's when I realized it was more enabling. So I'm a firm believer now in loving with boundaries. You know, you have to be willing to say no. Saying yes to everything doesn't work. So no was a very important word. And with him, he at one point needed a very structured environment. I mean, we had his evening and his morning, we had posters with what he was going to do every 30 or so minutes that had his picture on it, and you know what he was going to do, because that's what was required at the time. And so that's what worked then. And so I understand the difference now. So it's important that each of us learn that. I read something the other day, someone I follow on social media, and he said, the addict that you baby is the addict that you bury. And I thought, wow. You know, and it's not just the addict, it's, you know, whatever the situation may be, like you can't, I see people writing it down. I mean, I saved it, you know, on social media, because you can't hug away, you can't love away something, just like you can't hug away diabetes, you can't hug away a mental health condition, you have to treat it. So, thank you for that question. Hey, cousin. Anything else? Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay. No, I watched, you know, some of your postings on Facebook with you and your son, and it really got me when I saw that he had turned things around to where he was in the mood of being able to help and assist others. And that just, I mean, it just caught me like, wow, you know, this is what, I'm not saying that's what the goal was, but it certainly was a turnaround from where he came from. And it was just awesome, I just had to say that.
No, mine? Oh, okay.
I really appreciate you sharing a very personal story. I think it's great for us here in Marion. And I would challenge all of us leaders in the community. Marion's a small community. And so, admit to it or not, stigma is such a big thing. Like, you don't want someone to know this and you don't want them to know that. When actually we all suffer from some form of mental illness, some form of exposure. We have family members. So I would challenge us all to work toward removing that stigma in our day-to-day lives, in our families, in our churches, in our community, and the things that we get involved in. It's one thing to hear it, but if you say faith without action, what is it, you know? And so I would just challenge us all, myself included, to work toward helping remove that stigma in what we say and what we do. And we can take that forward. We'll have a much healthier community, much more progressive, healthier community when we do that. We as adults can't help our children if we don't deal with our matters. And a lot of times, we're faced with helping our children, and we have matters within us. And so, I just want to open that out to leadership here in the community, individuals here in the community, and maybe we can start work toward a healthier Marion.
Thank you so much for that. And I think, to your point, my poster over there says, 1 in 5. It's 1 in 5 adults, 1 in 5 youth, at some point every year has a mental health condition. And I've raised my hand and said, with the situation I was dealing with, yes, I have depression, yes, I have anxiety, and I have no shame about it. Of course, life happens, and if I had diabetes, if I had cancer, everybody would be coming up hugging me. It's going to be okay. We're going to put hands on you. We're going to pray for you. It's going to be okay. The mind is a part of the body. If we just realize that, I work a lot in Charlotte with faith leaders, and we target faith leaders because oftentimes faith leaders shy away from mental health, but we need our churches and our faith leaders to stand up and say, I understand that the mind is a part of the body, and people follow our faith leaders, our ministers, our pastors, our reverends, to say that it's okay not to be okay, and we'll support that. I've been seeing a therapist for I did it after my divorce. I'm seeing one now, and it's really okay. And if you think about it from the perspective of my son, and when I mentioned my son attempted suicide when he was 6, nobody said, there's no one in here who gave me this look like, no, you didn't say he had a mental health problem. You said, save your baby, right? So now as an adult, I'm saying I have to take care of myself. What's the difference? I have to take care of, I have to be okay for him to be okay. So that's the same way we should look at it as parents, as uncles, sisters, cousins. We have to be okay in order to take care of the next generation. It's the same thing.